We're live. Now, 1 second in.
Okay.
All right. Well, here we are, Wednesday, 6 o'clock in Perth. Welcome, Fivos
Welcome.
Panayiotou. I got that right.
You got it right. Yeah,
I got that right.
you got
Well,
it.
we should tell all the viewers tonight is that we've got a bit of a technical difficulty where we're getting a bit of an echo when I speak. Fivos. Okay. Well, I'll call you Fiv for sure because I see on the screen there you're Fiv.
Sure. It's what everyone else calls me, Fiv. So yeah.
Great. Um, I meant to ask you the other day when we were chatting, and I was telling you how the kids got me this Fitbit thing. I'm supposed to do 10,000 steps a day. If I do 7,000, it's a good day. But you said you do something like 25,000 steps a day. How do you manage to do that? You like a professional walker or something?
No, it's part of the job description. I work as a gas meter reader, so I do approximately 550, 600 people's houses a day. So I read their gas, and so I'm doing up to 25, 30,000 steps a
Wow.
day. So if it wasn't for the job, I probably wouldn't get that. I probably would be lucky to get half that. So yeah.
Wow, that's a bit. But you must have some stories from there. I mean, have you been bitten by a big dog? First
I've
thing that
been
comes to
chased by a
mind.
couple of huskies, Alaskan Malamutes, and Rottweilers. I've had some close calls. I haven't been bit yet, touch wood, but I've managed to
But
get away.
you've
It's
had
pretty.
some close calls.
Yeah, it's actually a funny story. Like I've gone into some houses where the handheld device doesn't mention. 9 times out of 10, it has a message, and it'll say, "Dog, beware, do not enter." So if it doesn't have that
Yeah,
message in, I walk in, and
yeah.
I see a Rottweiler coming right at me, so I'm slamming that gate shut, jumping the fence, and just lucky not to get bit. So it's happened
So
about a dozen times, but yeah,
you have to practice fence jumping in your spare time, just
yeah, I
in case.
reckon I do. I wasn't much of a high jumper, but I reckon I'm a fast learner. So
You,
yeah,
you must,
putting my hands on the fence and helping myself jumping over because I couldn't do it from just a standing start. So
you also carry all those gadgets.
yeah, carrying the phone, backpack, water bottle, and the handheld device. So, so the funny thing is, I'm throwing them over the fence and then jumping over because I don't want to be dropping them in someone's front lawn and not being able to get them back while the
Or
dog's
the
going
dog
off
chews
at me.
them
So,
up.
what's that, sorry?
Or the dog chews them up.
Yeah, I mean, the device is worth a couple of $1,000, so it'll come out of my pay. So I don't want the dog chewing it. So yeah.
But you must have some good stories of your travels around the neighborhoods. I mean, things that you, as a writer.
Had a couple of funny stories walking in and seeing things I shouldn't see early in the morning.
Oh,
um,
okay.
yeah, going in with people's windows open and seeing people coming out of the shower, unfortunately. So I've got to turn around and walk back out and come back in later on or something. So
Oh,
yeah, yeah, all kinds of. But yeah, it's a pretty cruisy job. I enjoy it. So keeps
so,
me
so,
fit.
so tell me, so you've written 2 books now.
Yeah, I've
So
got two
2 years,
books.
you 2 years back, you published um, User. That was the name of your book, User.
That's right. Yep.
And then last year, published another one called Beyond the Ruins.
That's right. Yeah.
So just tell us a bit about User. What was that about?
So user was a true story on a previous relationship that I had, and it was one of which, from a man's perspective, there was a lot of domestic violence, trauma, and a lot of abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse from someone that had a lot of narcissistic traits, someone that I walked into a relationship completely oblivious to a lot of things and very trusting and quite too trusting to be honest. And it was just a book that gave me a lot of therapy once I'd written it. So it talks about one man's hell and survival and willpower, sheer willpower and belief at times when he's down to rise above the obstacles and constantly find a way to will himself to get through it all and find peace at some point. Uh,
Yeah.
never say die attitude, I guess,
But
despite yeah.
there's quite a lot on you hear on talk shows about mental health and these sort of issues you speak of. That's mostly women seem to talk about it. Why is it you think that men don't talk about these issues?
I my understanding is being having grown up and having seen a lot of the abuse that women suffer. I think it's more what is considered to be the norm. I think a lot of men probably would love to speak out, but they've been brought up potentially to have been told that no, it's not manly to cry. It's not manly to speak up. We got to just take it on the chin and go with it. And real men are supposedly not supposed to feel pain or suffer in any kind of manner. It's that we're supposed to just be the ones that are in control of the situation. I think a lot of it is because maybe 35, 40, 45 years ago, before my time, that was the way the generations were brought up. But now in today's society, I don't think a lot is being a lot of respect is given to the men for what they're going through, and I don't think that I think they're feeling lack of self confidence. They're not made to feel to believe that they can speak up, so they suffer in silence, and they take hit after hit, and I believe that's a lot of the reason why there is a lot of male depression, drug abuse, suicide, and a lot of traumatic situations because they're not given the support, the encouragement, and the compassion or the consideration that's required to help them get to speak up. They're made so. And last one thing I will say is I think all it takes is one person to believe, and then perhaps the domino effect starts. One speaks up and the rest follow, but I'm not sure. That's just my take on it all, to be honest with
No,
you.
that's great to hear that. Hear you sort of speaking out about this, but your book touches on all of those topics, all of those forms of abuse, and men like keeping it in and not speaking up.
Yeah, it does. It was when I wrote the book, I was actually, believe it or not, I was actually, every day that I was there, I was reliving it. I actually, whilst my body was physically sitting in a library writing it, my mind was transported back to those days, reliving every scenario, every minute. So it was quite emotional and mentally draining. But I did touch on it, or I didn't hold back with, I was brutally honest with everything, whether it was humiliating towards myself or not. I was quite prepared to wear that and go with it. So, yeah.
So do you think that this was for you as a bit of a tipping point to sort of speak out about these things? Whereas, as you say, with your Greek Cypriot heritage, it was more, that was more manly not to speak up. So, what was the tipping point that made you sort of say you won't talk that?
The tipping point.
Yeah.
For me personally, I'd always wanted to be a writer from a young age, but I always put it off because I thought the guys, second cousins, uncles, etc., that from my father's side or just people in the family, friends of the family, they were all tradies, whether they were concreters, bricklayers. So the way I saw it was, why would I want to write a book? Because it isn't a real job, or it isn't any kind, like, even as a hobby. The only way to be successful in a lot of the Greek Cypriots or the Greeks that I grew up around, or that had an influence or in my life, was to work and slave away, shoveling, labouring, just physical labour. And I think as time wore on, I realised that I can't just go out and continue being a people pleaser or doing what I think is going to please those that I love and respect. I need to do what's right for me. And I had a lot to say. And the passing of my grandfather 4 years ago, whilst I'd had a lot of depression, anxiety throughout my childhood, and I'd had a lot of abandonment, neglect, isolation, and rejection, and above all, humiliation, I'd never really had grief. So when my grandfather passed 4 years ago this month, I was on a plane to Cyprus, and while I was there at the funeral, I just remember I couldn't stand. I couldn't. My grief got to consume me to the point where I thought, you know what, life's too short. I've got something to say. I'm going to go back and I'm going to write this, and it's going to be my therapy. Put pen to paper and type away and go with it from there, and be damned what anyone thinks or what. I just had something to say, and that was the
Good.
tipping point,
Yeah,
2018.
that's great. So what feedback have you had from men about what you written?
Surprisingly, look, I actually thought I was going to have a target on my back, and but which didn't phase me. But surprisingly, I've had a lot of positive feedback from a lot of the men that have were wild or impressed and inspired by it, or that they couldn't believe what I'd been through in that relationship, and they were nothing but full of praise and credit for me, and said that you should write again, and more men need to come out, and so they were. It was quite rewarding in a way. So it was a pleasant surprise, and
So they
had
said you
nothing
should
but good
write.
reviews. So
You said write another book, and so you went out and wrote Beyond the Ruins.
yeah, well, that was more because, see, for me personally, Mike, I didn't really care whether I wrote. I did, but I didn't. I was in two minds. I was happy to get the first one out. For me, that was just enough. That was an achievement enough. But then I thought long and hard. I was encouraged by many people in my circle of friends, which I don't have a large circle of friends, but the ones that said, look, you really need to write again. So I thought to myself, I really wanted to prove that the first book wasn't a fluke, and that I could back it up. So I thought I'd use a bit of creativity and bring a bit of fiction into some real life experiences to test my versatility and creativity as a writer, and see how I go. And that's what inspired me to write Beyond the Ruins. So,
So what's Beyond the Ruins all about?
so it's a mixture of friends and family that have had some childhood experiences mixed in. So it was kind of like some experiences that I had with friends and school, etc., from childhood, but it's thrown in with a bit of fiction romance just to give it a bit of spice. If so, it's kind of like what inspired me was I thought a lot of people in the 70s went and watched a movie called Titanic based on true events, the one that came out in 1979, but they all went because they probably wanted to appreciate what the survivors endured. And then you fast forward 20 years later, and James Cameron takes the same story, only he brings in a fictional romance with Leonardo DiCaprio and Kate Winslet, and all of a sudden, a tragic real life story with a fictional romance becomes a movie phenomenon. So I thought, why not bring in a fictional romance with some real life experiences that I enjoyed as a child, and bring in a bit of versatility? So that's what I kind of did, if that makes sense.
It does. But did you? But were you? Did you think of doing that based upon what you just told us about the Titanic movies?
That's what inspired me. I mean,
Okay.
I've always been fascinated by that, and the whole love story that was added in. And I thought, you know what? You change one tiny element of a story or any movie, and it's just a little thing. Sometimes a lot of people think that to make certain things happen, they need to make drastic changes in life, or whether it's sports, whether it's life in general, career, or anything like that. And all it really takes, or even stories, and sometimes it's the tiniest little detail that just needs enhancing, and it can make the world a difference. So that's what inspired me. Yeah.
So it's a standalone book from. It doesn't follow one from user.
No, no. It was just no. I changed the characters and things like that. It was inspired as well by both the movie The Titanic, as in what James Cameron did with his enhancing of the original, and then also with inspired by user to kind of bring in a lot of similarities as well, like similar stories, but only because I already had a lot of facts going and truths that happened. I thought I could. It gave me a lot of avenues to twist things around as well, if that makes sense. So Yeah.
But did you touch on all the other issues you mentioned before about men and abuse and not speaking out? And,
With the second book, you mean?
yes.
With the second book, there's some, not so much. No, there was a little. It touched more on some real life experiences from bullying that had happened while I was a child and underdeveloped a child. So as a kid growing up, I touched on, yeah, being taunted and having some issues with women that were bullying men or bullying boys. I was 4 years underdeveloped, so at the age of 12, 13, I was the development of an 8 to 9 year old. So, and it was open slather. And even the girls took fun and delight in having a go at me after a while. So I did touch on that from a so it's not quite to the extent of an adult male having troubled relationships, but different dynamics. So more so this time round, a boy going through difficulties, being bullied, racism. So I touched a little bit on that as well. If that, yeah, but not so much with that because I'm more going to go with the backstory to user at some point and touch on that as well.
If, I,
But
if,
yeah,
I, if I'm trying, just tell me to stop. But when you
yeah,
said
you
you're
can tell.
underdeveloped, how do you mean you're underdeveloped when you're small?
It was just I was a late bloomer, I guess. So when I remember early on, I was the shortest and skinniest and boy in my entire class, right up from grade prep, right up until until grade six. So when I was about 10 years old, an assistant principal of the at Coburg West approached my mother. She was absolutely a delight. She was an amazing human being, and she said to my mother that she had her son went through something similar. So I was sent to the Royal Children's Hospital in the late to early 90s, and they did bone X-rays, blood work, and at the endocrinology clinic, and it showed that I was developing physically, not so much mentally or even emotionally as. So whilst I was an 11-year-old, 12-year-old, I was 3 to 4 years slower than the average child, which explained why I was
Emotionally,
so tiny.
emotionally as well.
Yeah, and there was a lot of issues in the household as well, so that probably didn't that probably stemmed and kind of halted my development as well. Like self confidence was a big thing. I was down on confidence, and so that probably affected me mentally, emotionally. So as well as constantly being belittled and people thought that I was going to be a dwarf. I mean, I was this little midget and I was constantly called shrimp and midget, so that didn't help for years. So and the only consolation people said to me was give them the response: "Good things come in small things." What is it? Good things come in small packages, if I recall.
There we
So
go. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, so but that was the thing. I continued developing and into, believe it or not, into my late 20s. Yeah, mentally, just I had a growth spurt after I hit 22. I mean, wasn't tall, but I wasn't a midget like by any standards. So
Okay. All right. But all of this, you got a lot of material to like work with for
yeah,
a writer. There's a huge amount. Well, I mean,
definitely.
if you've grown up in a happy little home and you're the perfect kid, little picky thing, there's nothing to write about. Huh? Now you've got stacks.
What's that? Sorry.
Now you've got stacks of stories to tell.
I do. Yeah, definitely. It was
But
all
but you
about self.
think, but Viv, do you think you're going to explore this theme of men's mental health?
Am I gonna what? Sorry.
Explore this theme that's been on your first book and we touched on in your second about men and their mental health and speaking out.
Yeah, definitely. It's something that's big on my heart right now. It's something that I've got a couple of good friends of mine that have battled depression and that are very inspired and proud of the fact that they're very encouraging for what I've done, and I want to touch more on it. So if writing a third book or anything on any kind of experience or backing up user in any way can help inspire others to in any encourage them or to speak up or believe in themselves to then definitely, I
No,
mean,
but
like,
personally, personally, I think it's a wonderful idea.
yeah,
But
it's on my heart. I'm approaching guys, men's sheds, etc. But I think with COVID and OH&S and regulations, it's been made very difficult to have anyone like your times and arrangements and people being vaccinated, etc. It hasn't been easy, but it is something that I'm going to continue relentlessly pursue at some point. I'd love to get out there and speak out in front of other guys and let them know, just be bold and give them all the encouragement and confidence that, let them know that if I can do it, they sure as hell can. So if I can do it, any guy can do it. It's all
so
about
tell me,
mindset.
what actually is your writing process? Because you walk 30,000 steps a day. You get home at about 2:30 in the afternoon, I think you told me. What do you then do? Sit down and write. You must be tired,
It must be what, sorry?
weary, worn out, for all that walking.
I am. I mean, like, it's physically, and a lot of people assume that the job is pretty easy because there's a lot of walking, but come winter when it's raining, pouring rain, and steep driveways and a lot of enduring, depending on location, and walking up farm driveways, etc. It is quite taxing. So I mean, I then I eat quite a lot. I take a lot of fluids with me, so I come home, have a shower, and then I'll sit and I mean, like, I try and preserve myself for the Friday night or the Saturday to write, because as much as I love to sit there and jump on the laptop and start writing again, maybe I'm a little lazy, but I'm not motivated enough. I mean, I should even find time to go to the gym as well. So I'm completely spent 3 days a week. I find myself falling asleep in front of the TV watching Netflix or MacGyver or something. So by 7:30, 8 o'clock. So
But where do you write? You said earlier you went to the library for the first time.
when I wrote User and Beyond the Ruins, I was going to the local library because I didn't have access to a laptop. Now I've got a laptop, so I mean, which is why I probably come across a little lazy, because I've got one right in front of me. I can just jump on and write, but I keep uh, I keep putting it off. I mean, I'm halfway through two current books at the moment, but I just keep putting it off, unfortunately, because I
So,
am
so,
spent.
so you wrote that first book on a municipal library computer.
Yeah, I did it in 12 days, 6 Saturdays, 6 Sundays, 2 hours at a time at the Coburg Library. It was the only time I could get there on.
That's a whole book.
Yeah, yeah. You had
How many
two
pages in
hours.
the book?
What's that, sorry?
How many pages in the book?
I think from memory, approximately 235. I think it was about 88,000 words. It could be
Oh,
more. I'm
that's
not
good
sure.
going. So just tell me that again.
How
How
many
long did it take
days?
you?
So I did it over 6 Saturdays and 6 Sundays between February 2019 and March 2019. 2 hours at a time. So 12 days all up.
Just how many words were you churning out per day? I sort of can't, I'm not comfortable with the maths, but it's a lot.
Well, it was 88,000 words over the 24. I'm usually pretty good with numbers. I'm usually, but on the
If
spur
you
of the
said
moment,
that you say with your
I
two
would say
hours,
that it's a.
4 hours, I think it's 24. I'm sorry, you're not a bit crazy doing that stuff, but I mean, that's extraordinary. So you did, let's
About
say, 88,000
yeah.
divided by 24. You're doing like about 36 words a day,
How many?
3,600 a day.
Yeah, sounds about right. I mean, I know that when I did the word count each day, when I did the word count when I went there, it was between 3,000 to 4,000. So I thought, okay, I'm tracking pretty well. So yeah. So
But what did
I,
you just come to the burst?
what's that? Sorry.
You sit down and just come to the burst,
As in,
as
it
in the
just
word.
as in it came naturally. It just once I got the start and once I got the first potential 100 words out, it just came naturally from that point on for me. Is that what you were asking me? Sorry.
Yes, but when you're walking around doing your 30,000 steps, are you thinking about a book and what you're going to write? And
I am, yeah, pretty much, yes. I mean, my mind does drift. It thinks about a lot of other things. Like I love sports in general. Like I might be thinking about the footy or the World Cup soccer or something. But when it comes back to the book, I am constantly. It just comes natural. I got an idea, and three ideas might come in my mind for what I can potentially write, and then the next day the same thing, and so many ideas just come flooding in my mind, and it's like sometimes I got to stop and say, got to pull back a bit, so I don't get too lose focus on what I really want to talk about. But yeah.
But did you actually put a structure to the book and like write down what it's going to go to as like bullet points, or did you just go?
With user, no. It just with the first book, no, I didn't. I just went. I just wrote. It just came naturally. I just went along with it. With the second book, I did. Yes, I thought, look, I needed to sit down and I guess experience from the first one was to. I guess you learn from previous experiences. So I thought, all right, where can I go better, or what can I do different, so I can potentially have chapters in order. What do I want to do different? And I did structure it, but so with user there was no real structure. It was just straight from the heart and straight from memory, and away I
Yeah.
went. And with the second one, that gave me time to prepare differently, mentally better preparing. So yeah, there was more structure with the Beyond the Ruins.
But you go back to the library and sit there and do it.
Yeah, both books. Yeah, yes. I
So,
mean,
so the
yeah,
library's your place to sit and write.
it is because there's a lot of. It's just a peaceful environment there. There's hardly anyone there on a Saturday or a Sunday, and put the headphones in, and I had music, YouTube playing as well in the background. That kind of was inspiration as well. Like I had a lot of inspirational music playing in the background. That motivated me as well. So I put the headphones in, connected to the computer, and got away I go. It was a good distraction as well, if that makes sense. So
And you type with two fingers.
yeah, I don't know. For a bloke, I cannot type. I type pretty quickly, but I use two fingers. People have said to me many times, "Why don't you try typing like this?" And I just, no, no, no. Look, I'm too late for me to try it. And yeah, I just type two fingers. Yeah,
I also do.
yeah. I
I also
mean,
do.
people have sat there and said, "Viv, why don't you try typing like this?" And whilst I think, thanks, yeah, I try it, I give it a go, and then old habits die hard. I'm back to using two fingers again. So yeah,
But I think it's quite inspirational for people who like who have got a story to tell, and they think of all the reasons why they can't get up and do it. Whereas you just went to the library and used their computer and wrote a book.
yeah,
That's
I
quite
did.
incredible.
Well, yeah, I mean, I had the idea initially. So when did I write it? 2018. First time I thought about writing this particular book was 2014, but I was in a relationship with the person at the time. And I thought, well, I can't write it. I'm in a relationship. I'm going to sabotage it by. So I never gave it another thought. But I thought, I always felt like I had a gift for writing from a young age. I recall from a very young age, I always had a passion for wanting to write. And there was always an excuse. I kept coming up with excuses or dismissing the idea. I think my grandfather's death really was a driving, motivating force. I thought, you know what? I don't want to have any regrets when I leave this earth. So you know what? Give it a go. I'm not, and I did, and there were days where I thought, no, I'll just go and write it the following week. But I just thought, no, just push past and just keep writing, and whatever comes of it will make. Whatever happens will happen. But I just used sheer willpower and constantly willed myself, saying, you know what, I've got to write this for myself. Didn't really think much of it at the time. It was more just releasing, and yeah, so I'm
So,
happy to
so
say I've written.
do you think your grandfather is looking down from heaven and smiling at you now?
Yeah, I do believe that. I see him in my dreams. I've woken up, had a few, gotten a bit anxious in the middle of the night. I see him. I've seen him many times in my sleep, in my
Okay.
dreams, with him and my grandmother. And I mean, my grandmother's still alive, thank God. I believe he's. I believe that they. Yeah, he's watching. Yeah, I do. I've always believed in that kind of, that there is more to this life in the next life, and I feel like he'd be proud. I mean, he was an amazing father figure for my brother and I when we were growing up. He did a hell of a lot for my brother and I. So, and I'll never forget that. So I believe he would say, "Hey, didn't know you had the writing ability, but I'm proud of you," kind of thing is what he might have said.
That's wonderful. But, so what are you going to do now? What's on the horizon now? What's the next one?
So the next one, so I'm writing two at the same time. So the one of them is not a lot of people agree with what I'm doing because I've got some friends that go to church, etc. But I'm actually touching on a different genres, like a Fifty Shades of Grey. But it's a twist, like it's kind of like a crime, dramatic, like an underbelly kind of with. So it's a bit of a mixture with a few twists and plots here and there. So I'm just testing out my creativity there as well. I was told sex sells, so I thought, all right, why not? I've sort of touched on it with User, and the other book is going to be a backstory to User, as in a prequel. That what led me to the point of going down that path and
Okay.
making those bad choices.
So all the topics you touched on in user will all they be like as you will get to see how that happened.
Yeah, pretty much
That's a
is
great idea.
what I'm hoping to do. That's what I'd
Yeah.
like to do, and see how I go. Yeah.
And how far down the track is that?
Well, I'm already halfway with both books, but I think I hit a snag with motivation and that when we're in the. We just. So, what are we in? We're in June now. So, I mean, I might have started writing in January, February, and then. I can't recall. There were just a few things going on, and. But I'm guessing that I'm thinking that if I get stuck into it again, would be most likely September. I could be finished by. I'll give myself a little bit of time. I won't speed through it. I'll just prepare a lot differently than what I have with previous books and take my time and enjoy writing more than I did with the first two, if that makes sense. So I'm thinking September, mid September is the deadline for when I'd like to have them both manuscripts written.
Why are you doing two books at once? Doesn't isn't that difficult? I don't do that. I do one at a time.
I I don't know why. I just thought I like a challenge, and I thought, you know what, I'm gonna test myself here and challenge myself. So no real reason actually. I just thought I'm so desperate and keen to write both books that I couldn't choose which one I wanted to write first, and then work on the other. So I thought, why not write both? And I'm not having any difficulty with it at the moment. Not at the moment. Touch wood. So yeah.
But so what's the other book about? You mentioned one of them, the crime one. What's the other one about?
Oh, so the other one will be a prequel, a backstory to User. So
Oh,
it'll be
so
a
one the crime one, which will stand alone, isn't
what's that? Sorry.
it? So the crime one will stand alone.
Yeah, yeah, it'll stand alone. It'll be a different genre. It'll just be something completely different to what I've done. Uh, yeah, whereas the other one that I'm working on will be pretty much what a lot of people have asked me. They said to write, why don't you write a backstory to the first book that I wrote? So it'll be a lead up as to. There were a lot of questions as to why I allowed myself to endure and go through and make those choices and where my. So I guess writing that one, whilst it was fascinating to some people that enjoyed it, there were more questions, especially for people that friends of mine that knew me for a good 15 years or so that thought, wow, we didn't know you went through all that. And secondly, we didn't realize that you viewed yourself that way, or you allowed why did you weren't strong-willed enough to walk away, or so basically this next story, the backstory will open up and answer all the questions, give people an insight as to why I I went down that path with user, and
But,
where my
okay,
headspace at
so
that.
with user, what age is the protagonist in user? What age is he when he kicks off
So he
in the
was
user?
29 to 30 at the time. So he was still 29. He hadn't hit 30 yet. He was closing in on turning 30 at the time.
And with this backstory book, it's going to go from what age to 29?
Well, after talking with my editor, Susan Wakefield, she's amazing. Susan, she's edited both my books. We had a few chats here and there, and said like I'm going to go back as early as 4 to the beginning from my
Good idea.
earliest roots. So that way it covers everything. I mean, if I was to start at 10, 12, it wouldn't, it'll just open up more questions. Or hang on a second, why this, why that? But if you go back to the earliest roots of a child's development and he's at the earliest stages, and then see, well, hang on, he's experiencing this, this, and this, then there can be no question as to why. Only people would like to perhaps assume to say, well, maybe they think they would have turned out a lot different, but easier said than done until someone's walked in that shoes. As a child, you have no choice with what you experience, and it comes down to trusting two good parents that are going to love and nurture and respect and give you compassion and empathy. And if you don't have that, then it's almost highly improbable that you can rise above it unless you've got one or two people in your life that love and in my case, I've had a great grandmother. I still, she's tough, she's domineering, but she's always loved and given me. She's protected me and she stood by me when I was going through a lot. So that's how I've been. That's where the book will really.
So is she going to get a mention in the book?
Oh, she's going to get a big mention. She's amazing. I mean, we've
Okay.
clashed a lot. She's driven me crazy because she's one of the toughest women I've known in my life, and that's coming from a lot of people that know her. And I'm pretty easygoing, and I'm not a hard person. So
So as well as giving you a lot of love, she did kick you out on one occasion.
what's that? Sorry.
So as well as giving you a lot of love, did she kick your ass on more than one occasion?
Yeah, she can be very fiery and very. Yeah, not many people can handle my grandma. But
How old is she now?
87.
87. Okay.
If she didn't
So,
smoke, she could go another 10 years, but she smokes like a chimney, unfortunately.
uh, are you going? You mentioned one of the topics you mentioned is racism.
Racism, yeah.
Are
I
you going to
think.
touch on that as well again? Or you sort of mentioned that, but flew over it.
What's that, sorry?
You mentioned it earlier, but you haven't raised it again because I can remember that when I was in late high school, and we used to go and get, and I had a flashback when the only job we could get as students was physical labour, and there was a thing in Sydney called the water board, and they're always digging these big trenches, like 2 meters deep, and you had to go down with a jackhammer and a big shovel. That's what we did. So after sitting in a desk for 6 weeks studying, you were suddenly chucked into and I can recall there was two sheds. One was what we called the Australians, and the other one was for the Greeks and the Italians. And I can remember going there because in my school we had people from all sorts of cultures in Sydney, and they said, no, this is where this. They said, mate, you're here because all the Greeks and Italians were.
Okay.
What? That was like there was racism there. And I never even heard the word racism. I
Yeah.
don't think. But you must have stories to tell about that as well. But that was coming. In Sydney it was. So anyway.
The only reason that there was a bit of racism, I don't believe that it would have been as heavily inflicted upon myself and maybe it's silly saying this, but I genuinely believe that a lot of it was the name. I mean, it isn't a very common name, Fivos, but a lot of them. I think if it had been a more common Greek name, Peter, George, Con, Chris, or something. But I was singled out because there was only one Fivos where I went to school in Coburg, and there was only one Fivos where I went to high school in two different high schools. So it was an unusual name. It was maybe a rather weird. It was a name that no one had heard of before, so kind of like a lot of the Anglos or the Australian boys, or just in general, would mock the name and ask me what it meant, and they were quite racist towards it, unfortunately, and probably given that I was lacking a lot of self confidence and coming across not quite mentally mature to their level, and a lot of anger and hurt going through. Like, just I had a lot of issues as a child, so I probably put a target and was open slather on myself, and I probably didn't help my own cause either, being the sort of kid that I was, rebellious, firing up and snapping back and daring to being bold and challenging anyone that, regardless of the fact that I was going to get my rear end handed to me on every occasion. So,
But
so
Viv, you actually speak very eloquently about these topics.
about the
Were
what's
you
that?
able to do this? I said you speak very eloquently about these topics.
Thank you.
Okay. Were you able to do this before you wrote the book? Speak like this.
No, no, the book. No, I wasn't. I, I wasn't that. I wasn't confident and able to do it. No, I think, the writing the book has given me a lot of growth, and has given me a stronger mindset and daring to believe more in myself and being able to speak out better. So, but
But
no,
do you
no.
think it's going to help to sort of structure your thoughts on all of these
What's that?
things over the years?
What's that? Sorry.
I said, you think it has helped to structure your thoughts over
Yeah,
the
I
from?
believe it has. I believe the more life experience. I don't believe it's anything to do with people getting older or anything. I believe it's to do with life experience. I think that shapes you as a human being. So I think, and you just grow mentally and even emotionally. Like, you start touching in on emotions you didn't realize you had, and you start having more the confidence. I believe everyone has that confidence hidden. It's just a matter of whether we find it and start showing it more. And so here I am. All I
But
needed was a bit of a
are you
kick.
doing where you live? Are you doing any public speaking on this topic?
No, I've never done any public speaking. No, I'm not doing any.
I think it's something to look at. Right?
Really, a
Yeah.
couple of people have said that. I wouldn't know where to start or where to go or anything like that. But I did mention earlier that talking at a men's shed might help. But outside of that, no. It's I've had people say to me, "You should. You ever thought about being a public speaker?" And I thought, who am I to do that? Or but
Well, there's a local radio station over here in Perth, not far from where I live. Yeah, I live far south of. I live far south of Perth, down 1K away from Mackay. How's that?
what's that? Sorry.
I live 1K. I'm so far south. I live 1K away from Mark McGowan.
Oh, okay.
Mark and I were like this one.
Oh wow.
Joking. But there's a radio station here which focuses on mental health.
Okay.
So I'll have a chat with them. Maybe they'll get in contact with you, and you can talk about this a bit more.
Okay.
Yeah, that'll be good. Oh, well, I wish you well with your endeavours. It's been 45 minutes. It's flown.
Yeah, no, definitely. I'll say this quickly. I was surprised by some of the guys that were impressed by the first book. I've got a couple of mates. One of them he promotes some MMA fights, and he's a tough boy, and he's got a heart of gold. My mate Wayne, and he when when he read the book, I wasn't sure how he was going to take it, and he loved the book, and that I think what really got to me when you've got some. Some guys that are like probably come across like the real tough boys, and when they actually loved the book and were wowed by it, that was a huge game changer. That's where my confidence grew, because I thought if if they were either going to mock me for it, or they were actually going to admire me for it, and so
Well, that's something to also write about. Is why a lot of these guys who are top MMA fighters, what's their underlying psychology.
Yeah, it's a good one. I mean,
Yeah?
I mate this guy, this friend of mine. He's brilliant with his insight on sports and everything, and I wouldn't know what to write with that, but he would. But then again, it would be something if I get enough experience watching the fights, etc., things like that, I could touch on it as well. Yeah. So.
That'd be great. Listen, our time's up.
Oh,
It's been
already.
wonderful talking to you.
Thanks for that. Yeah, it's been a pleasure.
Cheers, Steve. We'll do this again.
Definitely, it'll be good. Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks, mate. See
Okay,
you, mate.
don't go late.
Bye. Bye.
Okay.